Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Kiddushin, Daf Lamed Vav, and we're starting 10 lines or so from the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis, the second of the wide lines with Isi Tani. Now, before we get started, I'm not going to be here Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I'm coming back Friday morning. On Tuesday, tomorrow, I know when I'm recording, and the rest of the days, I don't even know what I'm going to do on Wednesday. I really don't have time to try and figure it out. Thursday, less complicated, and we'll have to figure it out. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Basically, we'll figure it out. I'll be on an airplane, so we'll figure it out.
What's the Daf?
What about
Today we're learning Lamed Vav.
I mean, are we gonna do like Sunday morning?
it was.
This coming Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah, gotta figure it out. But yeah, probably. You guys are way ahead of me. I'm just happy that we're here tonight. All I knew was that I didn't have a choice but to have it after a tinus, which I'm not a big fan of. Okay. Yesterday, based on our Mishnah, yesterday we had learned that there are a number of mitzvos lo sa'aseh that a woman is not chayeves to keep. We said that there's the Isra of Baal Takif, we said that there's the Isra of Baal Tashchis, and we said that there's the Isra of Baal Tatam el Mesim, that a Kohenes is allowed to become Tmeah. Now, we had concluded that a woman has no Isra of Hashchasa by facial hair, therefore she has no Isra to shave her head, and then unrelated, she is able to become Tmeah el Mesim. We discussed all of those dinim yesterday. And today, on the second of the wide lines on Lamed Hey Amud Beis, 10 lines or so from the bottom, Isitani af bal yikorchu nashim peturos. Women are also exempt from another halacha of bal yikorchu, which is that when a person is upset after a death, that they out of sadness they shave their head, they cut a patch in their hair. That is an isur d'oraisa, so we do not allow for such things to take place, and a woman is exempt from that isur. Says the Gemara, my time of the isi. What is the reason why Isi adds in this particular exemption for women? Now there are 4 mitzvos lo sa'aseh that a woman does not have to keep. Says the Gemara, the Darish Hachi. This is how he understood the pasuk. The pasuk starts, Banim atem la Hashem elokechem, you're children of Hashem. Lo siskodedu, you're not allowed to cut yourself. Lo sasimu karcha bein einechem, you're not allowed to create a bald spot between your eyes, limes, for a person who has died. Ki'im Ki am kadosh ata Hashem elokecha, because you're holy. And what do we see in this pasuk? Banim v'lo banos. We see that there's a diuk that the pasuk says banim atem Hashem elokechem, and then the brisa adds in the strange word of lekorcha, meaning the way the brisa understood the pasuk is that even though the pasuk was talking about both lo siskodedu, which is cutting yourself, and lo yikrechu, which is cutting a patch of hair, so says the Gemara, the word banim only excludes from the world of korcha, meaning a woman has no isser of lo yikrechu, but she does have an isser of cutting into her flesh when she is upset with a death. So asks the brisa openly, 8 lines, 7 lines from the bottom, ata omer lekorcha. You say that women are ptura from lo yikrechu, but o eino ela legdida. Perhaps, again, the word lo siskodedu of cutting. Perhaps we should say that really a woman is also ptura from gedida, from cutting herself. When the pasuk concludes that you are a holy nation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, hare gedida amor. That part's talking about gedida. That's talking about the entire people. Gedida applies to both men and to women. They're both subject to the Yisr. It says the Gemara, Hamani mekayim banim v'lo banos. Why then do I then have the drasha of banim, and to exclude women it must be lekorcha? The Gemara says, I hear what you're saying, but why did you learn the brisa that way? There's another way to do this. Says the Gemara, Ma rois l'rabos es hagedida. Why is it that you said that a woman is chayeves in gedida, of cutting into her flesh, ulahotzi es korcha, and she's exempt from the isser of korcha? She has no problem if she is angry. She's allowed to shave a patch in her head. When I was in high school, a boy in my class at the yeshiva took a shaver, and under his kippah, he put his initials in DJ down to the scalp. Okay, he didn't do it out of sadness for death. He did it to be rebellious. Now, if he would have done it because of sadness of death, it's mamash a pasuk and chumash. You're not allowed to do that. So what's the din lamaisa? A woman is ptura from this isser. She's allowed to do that. If she's upset and she wants to put someone's initials in her hair after somebody dies, no problem. She's allowed to do that. It says the Gemara, but why is it that you learned that way? Why is it? Because I easily could have learned the brisa the other way, where a woman is patura from the cutting into her skin, and not just from the shaving of her head. So says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom. Mar be'anias hagedida. The reason why we're saying that a woman is chayeves in the isser, why she's shaykh to the isser of cutting into her skin when someone dies, is sheyeshna b'makom haseir v'shelo b'makom haseir, because it applies to various parts of a person's body. You can do so in your hair, you can cut your scalp, you can cut your arm, you can cut anywhere on your body, no problem at all. But a woman is exempt from the isser of cutting her hair. She'ena ela b'makom seir. Sounds like a svara kozeves. It's not even a strong argument, but that's what the Gemara says as to why a woman is petura from korcha. She's allowed to shave her head out of sadness from a death. However, from losis godadu, from gedida, from cutting into her flesh when she is sad, that is not allowed. Ve'ema, perhaps we should say, banim velo banos, bein lekorcha, bein legdida. Why don't we entertain the possibility that when the pasuk says banim atem lashem elokechem, and it's followed by the 2 isurim of lo siskodedu and lo yikruchu korcha, perhaps we should say that banim and velo banos teaches us that a woman is exempt from both, from korcha and from gedida, both from shaving her head when she's upset and from cutting into her skin when she's upset. And v'chikasav ki'am kadosh atol Hashem elokecha. And when we are talking about the rest of the pasuk of ki'am kadosh, that is bisritahu dechsiv. That's not talking about cutting into your skin, but talking rather about scratching into your skin. The word srita. What?
What happens if you have an itch and you scratch?
Not what we're talking. We're talking about scratching and leaving a mark. I don't know. I've never learned the din. Yeah.
You're really making scratches. You have to imagine.
I mean, there are people who do that with their bare hands. They can make themselves bleed. Again, I don't know what the parameters are in halacha. It could be that there's a kli, but it has to be a kli that's not gedida, that's not losis godudu, that's cutting. So there's something between the light scratch of the arm and cutting to the point where you're putting a knife to your arm for the sake of sadness. I don't know the halachos here, but we'll see in a moment why why we're not worried about this havamina. Says the Gemara, maybe we should say that the rest of the pasuk is srita, and really, what would this understanding be? That a woman is chayeves in lo siskodedu and lo yikrechu, but she's exempt from srita. So to this, the Gemara says, "Kasavar isi srita ugdida achasi." This gets to the heart of our question. The scratching of your arm, the cutting of your arm, halacha l'maisa, they are the same exact thing. Rashi, to David's point, top of the page, Rashi dibra maskal achasi mashmos shtehen bein biyad bein bikli. Who knew that maybe you could use a sharp implement, maybe you could use your nails? Doesn't make a difference. The chora, the isser is exactly the same. Now, all of this was approach 1, that the reason why Isi was of the opinion that a woman is exempt from Bal Yikruchu was because of the pasuk of Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem. Let me just look up the right words here. Lo sasimu korcha. Okay, doesn't say Yikruchu. Lo sasimu korcha. But Abaye on the top of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph actually gives another reason as to why Isi holds this way. The Gemara reads, Abaye Omar, Hainu Taima de Isi, de Gamar Korcha Mibnei Aharon. We have Korcha by us, and we also have Korcha in regards to Kohanim. And Malahala Nashim Peturos, Avkan Nashim Peturos. And just like by many of the halachos of women as it relates to Kohanim, that the halachos apply to the male Kohen but not to the female Kohen, so too over here. Just like a woman who's a female is exempt from cutting a bald spot onto her head, so too a woman who is not a Kohenes, a regular Yisraelis, is also exempt from the Isser. And says the Gemara, V'is viralan v'chikasav kra v'kule inyanahu d'chsiv. And if you want to say, it seems that Abaye is relying on the fact that the Bnei Aaron applies throughout all the psukim. So if you want to say that when the pasuk says Bnei Aaron, it's bekule inyanahu d'chsiv, that all of the halachos are going to be men only and not women, kohanim and not kohanos. So says the Gemara 5 lines down on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, then nishto kramine, then don't even say Bnei Aaron. If it's all going to be across the boards, then perhaps we should say that we don't need the words Bnei Aaron at all. And v'teisi v'kal v'chomer. And I can learn out these halachos in the following simple, logical way. I'll say, Uma kohanim, just like we know, because we've learned a lot of shas so far, just like by kohanim, sheriba behem akasuv mitzvos yaseros, that we know that there are many halachos that apply to Kohanim that don't apply to anybody else. And Bnei Aharon v'lo benos Aharon. And we know that throughout all of these halachos, they apply to men. And they don't apply to women. Yisrael lo kol shekain. If you have a non-Kohen, non-Kohenes, I should say, Pashat that that's the case, that it doesn't apply to her either. So says the Gemara, that can't be. Because he loved Gzeira Shava. Without the Gzeira Shava of Korcha, Havamina Hifsika Inyan. I might have thought that the words Bnei Aaron only applied to the basic din of Al Tatami Lamesim, which is a din that only applies by Bnei Aaron and not Benos Aaron. And without that, without the Gzeira Shava, Havamina that Hifsika Inyan. Says the Gemara, so what? Hashtanami Nema Hifsika Inyan. As who cares? And the imishum Gzeira Shava, and if your concern is about the Gzeira Shava, we need the Gzeira Shava for something else. Mi boy le lechadatanya. The brisa is used for another halacha. What other halacha is there? Lo yikrichu. The pasuk says you're not allowed to cut something. We'll see. Yachal afilu kerach arba v'chamesh krachos lo yehe chayev ela achas. Let's say a person cuts themselves multiple times out of sadness of death. You might have thought that if they cut themselves 5 times, they're only going to be chayev once. Talmud lomar korcha. We see that that's not correct, that they're going to be chayev multiple times. L'chayev al kol achas ve'achas. What does the word birosham teach us? Ma Talmud lomar. Lefi shenemar losis godedu v'losasimu korcha b'neinechem lameis. Because we already have a pasuk, the pasuk that we started with earlier today, that one is not allowed to cut themselves, and one is not allowed to shave a bald patch when somebody dies. Yochel lo yehe chayev ela bein ha'einayim. Perhaps we would have thought that the only prohibition is literally between the eyes, where someone out of sadness, I don't know why this would be the reaction of a person out of sadness to cut in between their eyebrows. In our culture, standard fare for women to do so for personal reasons, so that it looks nicer from their perspective. So says the Gemara, maybe we would have thought that the Isser of shaving one's hair in between their eyes is the only time the Isser applies when somebody dies. So says the Gemara, Talmud lom minayin lerabos kol harosh. How do we know that it applies for all hair on the head, not just bein einayim? Talmud lomar berosham lechayev al harosh kebein ha'einayim. So says the Gemara, that's how we know that when a woman has an Isser, when a woman is exempt from an Isser, I should say, of lo yikruchu, we might have thought the Isser was everywhere. That's true for men, but for women, they're totally exempt. And says the Gemara, ve'ein li ala kohanim sheriba b'mitzvos hakasav yiseros Yisrael minolan. These psukim really don't talk about kohanim. All of this so far is really only about a kohenes. How do we know about a Yisrael? Yisrael minolan, says the Gemara, ne'emar kan. This is our kal v'chomer from above. Ne'emar kan korcha v'ne'emar lahalan korcha. Makan chayev al kol korcha v'korcha v'chayev al harosh kivenu ha'inayim. Just like we know that by a kohen, that the kohen is chayev on every korcha, on every cut, and between the eyes. Aflahalan, the same exact thing would be true by others, by other men. Lahalan chayev al kol korcha v'korcha v'chayev al harosh kivenu ha'inayim. Umalahalan al meis afkan al meis. Im kain, says the Gemara, nichtov kra kerach my korcha. Says the Gemara, no, that kal v'chomer is not correct, because really it could have been kerach instead of korcha. My korcha shamas mine tarte, that according to Abaye, we're able to learn out 2 things. We're able to learn out the din of multiple cuts are still going to be chayiv, and we're able to learn out the din that a woman is exempt from the isser of korcha. That's what shamas mine tarte is. And now we've seen 2 answers as to why Isi holds that when a woman, if a woman were to cut hair either between her eyes or on her head, lemeis, for the sake of a person who died, halacha lemaisa, she'd be p'tura. She is not shaykh to that isser. It's a very odd thing to think about, that a woman is not shaykh by an isser. That's a very difficult thing to understand. I mean, we need the Mari Mukomos, otherwise it just sounds arbitrary. Certainly not arbitrary. And in fact, the Gemara is going to provide a 3rd answer. We had our first answer of the day with no name attached to it. Our second answer of the day was Abaye at the top of the page. And here we are a little bit more than 2/3 of the way down, about 15 lines above the wide lines. Rava Amar Hainu Taima de Isi, Diyalit Beineinechem Mitfilin. Oh, says the Gemara, we learn out from the world of tefillin. Malahalan nashim peturos. Just like we know that women are peturos from tefillin. Afkan, here too, by lo yikrachu nashim peturos. Okay, that's the easiest answer of them all. We just learned from the world of tefillin. Says the Gemara, V'Rava my taimelo amar ke Abaye. Why doesn't Rava learn about the Gzeira Shava korcha korcha, and kerach is korcha. There's an extra letter, so he makes that double drasha. Why won't Rava learn like that from Abaye? The Gemara says because kerach korcha lo mashmale. He's not willing to make a drasha based only on the extra letter hey between kerach and korcha. Okay. So says the Gemara Abaye, my time alo Amar Kirava. Abaye, who does make this drasha of korcha korcha, so says the Gemara, why won't he hold like Rava about tefillin? Says the Gemara, Amar lach tefillin gufayhu mehacha gamar la. Says the Gemara, tefillin themselves are needed. The words beinei nechem are needed for tefillin. Remember what we learned about the words beinei nechem? Have you ever seen these Jewish souls who wear their tefillin like literally on their forehead? Zero. Nothing. You're not yotze the mitzvah. It's probably usher. It's possibly usher according to some poskim, the tzedukim, not so pasha. And if you see a Jew like that, you should find a gentle way to be madrich them that their tefillin are in the wrong place. Be like, I'm not sure if you know, but I got to say it the right way. You have to kind of read the scenario. But tefillin have to be, in fact, completely above your hairline, if you have a hairline. And if you don't have a hairline, it's whatever your hairline used to be. And not only that, but there are shitas that say that the tefillin have to be above your hairline. If your finger is literally, if you like take your finger and put it straight up at your hairline, the tefillin should not even touch your finger. It should be set back far enough that it's not even touching your finger. That is the appropriate place where the tefillin should rest. But makom rosh hatinok rofes, the place where the fontanelle was when they were little children. And in Eastern medicine, by the way, there is I heard this, I don't know if it's true. The space where tefillin rests is a place of, the pressure point is a place of wisdom. I think tefillin is more important than the Eastern medicine. I'm just saying there's an alignment. That's what they say, that Avram, he sent matanos le'ai, he sent matanos to the east. So some people say that he sent the matanos to the east. The matanos he sent was like these massive yisodos in Kabbalah, and they've been holding on to them for a couple of 1,000 years. No, I don't know. So says the Gemara, Abaye is not ready to listen to Rava because tefillin, we need the words beinei nechem for something very specific, which is to teach us that it's not beinei nechem mamish, that it's actually above the hairline. So says the Gemara, what was the limud that we had with beinei nechem? Malahalan makom she'osim korcha begova shel rosh, at the height of the head, not between your eyes. Afkan makom anocha begova rosh. That's what we're talking about. That's why we need korcha. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. And ubein le'Abaye, ubein le'Rava, according to Abaye and to Rava, who disagree with answer number 1 that we learned earlier today, says the Gemara, Hi banim atem my darshibe. What did they do with the words banim atem? Only the first answer needed the drasha banim below banos, because Abaye learned from korcha korcha, and Rava learned from tefillin. So what do we need banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem for? Says the Gemara, Haimi baile lichadetanya. This comes to teach us, and an apropos time to hear the machlokas tanaim about how much Hashem considers us to be his children. The first answer is a little sharp. The second answer is a little bit more loving and doting. Says the Gemara, Lichadetanya, 2/3 of the way down, 5 lines before the wide lines. The Gemara says, Banim atem laHashem Elokechem. Abaye and Rava say, this brisa is what we need to understand the words Banim atem laHashem Elokechem. How so? Bizman she'atem nohagim minhag banim atem kriyim banim. When you behave like a child, we consider you like a child. When you're not behaving like a child, yikes. Rabbi Yehuda is a hardliner. When you behave the way you're supposed to, which is none of us, when you behave the way you're supposed to, so then you're good to go. When you don't behave the right way, then you're not called a ben anymore.
So it's like being a little kid, or is that off the derech, or in between?
I don't know what to tell you. It may be as simple as the language, which is very sharp. Im einatem noagim minhag banim. Just the way children are supposed to act. Is that like that they listen to their parents? I don't know. Today, the definition of what a child is supposed to do is different than what a child was supposed to do when I was a child.
The age where the person is, meaning.
Could be.
Yeah.
But if Rabbi Yehuda is really being a hardliner,
a certain way, a lot different than
I don't know. I could think of 100 ways to explain this. I don't. Anything on the page that stands out? No, not from Tosfos. No. Rashi also is quiet. I think they were smart. They're like, oh, I don't want to touch this one. No, I don't know the answer. It's a good question. But But that's Rabbi Yehuda. Let's now learn about Rav Meir. Rav Meir was normally the one who's particularly crisp, but here we will see that he. What?
It's funny. I was thinking
It is reversed, yeah. It's a different approach and personality. Not only is Rav Meir warm, but we'll see that he doesn't only bring one pasuk to support his shita, he brings like 5. Says the Gemara, second line before the wide lines, Rav Meir Omer, Ben kachu ben kach atem kurim banim. Even if you're not noheg kiminag banim, Kadosh Baruch Hu always considers you their children. Why? Number 1, Shneimar, banim sechalim hema. The fools, they're still considered banim. Number 2, V'omer banim lo emun bi. The children didn't believe in me, still called children. He didn't say the wayward ones don't believe in me, he called them banim. Right? So when you punish your child, you're my child in exile, you're still my child. Number 3, V'omer, let me just read this correctly. Says the Gemara, Zera mireim banim mashchisim. Zera mireim, the seed that is bad. They're banim, children who are mashchisim. Number 4, second of the wide lines, in a place where we say that you're not my nation. Still b'nei. So we see that Rav Meir brings a whole host of psukim, and obviously we are familiar. Every time we see multiple psukim introduced by Ve'omer pasuk X and Ve'omer pasuk X, the Gemara regularly asks, "My Ve'omer?" 3/4 of the way down. Maybe we can say when the kids are acting foolish, okay, that's just normal misbehaviors. The kid's still called the kid; he's still my ben. But when they don't believe in me, lo mikru bani. Perhaps I would have thought when there's no emuna, when they don't believe in me, that they're not called children. Tashma ve'omer banim lo emun bi. That's why the second pasuk is there is to teach us we're not just talking about regular foolishness. Even if a person has major hashkafic flaws, they're still considered to be a ben. Perhaps we should say that when a person lacks emunah, okay, that's where you'll say they're a ben. But when they serve idols, perhaps we would say they're no longer considered a ben. Says Reb Shimon, no way. Wow, the love is endless. You're always a ben. Maybe you want to say that these children who are worshiping Avodah Zarah, who are being destructive, they're the ones who get the name of Ben. But to say that they're Ma'alya, lo mikri, but they're not considered to be the top-notch kid, says the Gemara, not correct. Even when they're not behaving like a part of our nation. So what's the pasuk say? B'nei kel chai. You are the children of a living God. You are my child. You are always my child. It reminds me of the story of this particular child who was from a Torah home. They weren't observant, and they had to go to work. And every Shabbos morning, the mother and daughter would walk hand in hand to walk her daughter to the train. Same idea. You're my daughter. You're always my daughter. You're always going to be my daughter. So that's what Rav Meir held in regards to the drasha, and really what more broadly what Abai and Rava did with the pasuk of Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem. According to the first approach of Isi ben Yehuda, we needed the approach of Banim Atem Lashem because Banim velo Banos. That's why a woman was exempt from the Isra of Korcha. But according to Abai and Rava, who learned differently, Abai learned that it was based on Gzeira Shav of Korcha. Rava learned that a woman was exempt from this based on Tefillin. What did they do with Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem? It was to show you how much Kadosh Baruch Hu loves us. A great time to have a strengthening message. New Mishnah, 8-9 lines from the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Hasmichos, doing smicha on an animal. Vehatznufos, certain movements of animals. Vehahagashos, bringing things to the Beis HaMikdash. Vehakmitzos, the grasping of the flour with that special grip. Vehahaktaros, doing anything with the ktores. Vehamalikos, the special way to kill a bird with a nail. Vehakabalos, the collection of bloods. Vehazos, the sprinklings. Noagim be'anoshim velo benoshim. All of these apply to men, and they don't apply to women. Chutz mi mincha sota unazira, except for the korban mincha of a sota and a nazira, which we've learned about in previous masechtas, shehein minifos. In those cases, the women are miniaf. They do the actual movements. So the next many lines are very easy. We can just plow through them quickly. Smichos. How do we know that a woman doesn't do smicha? Tichsiv daber al bnei Yisrael b'samach. Bnei Yisrael somchen, ve'ein bnos Yisrael somchos. That men do smicha, not women. Tnufos, how do we know that men do tnufa and women don't? Says the Gemara, Dechsiv daber al bnei Yisrael v'heniv. Bnei Yisrael manifin, ve'ein bnos Yisrael manifos. What about hagashos? About bringing things toward the Beis Hamikdash. Tichsiv v'zos Toras hamincha hakrevo sa b'nei Aharon. Who brings things close? Who is megish? Who presents things? B'nei Aharon v'lo b'nos Aharon. Kmitzos, the hand grip of the flower, where you take a grip, open the pinky, open the thumb. This says the Gemara, Dichsi v'hevia el b'nei Aharon v'kamatz, b'nei Aharon v'lo b'nos Aharon. Haktaros, what about being maktir the ktores? Says the Gemara, Dichsi v'ktiro so b'nei Aharon v'lo b'nos Aharon. What about hamalikos? What about the nail into the neck of the animal? That special form of shchita that only works under certain circumstances. Otherwise, the animal's a treifa, right? We have a treifa bird, a nevela bird lying on our steps right now. That wasn't really malika. That's just an animal that died. It's a nevela. It says the Gemara, how do we know that the malika doesn't work by a woman? Malak v'hiktir, iskish malika lehaktara. That we have a comparison, a hekish between malika, which we already said is banim below banos, it's bnei Yisrael below banos, and we compare that to aktara, and therefore we know that they're both awesome. Hakabalos. What about a woman receiving dam? She's not allowed to do that. B'nei Aharon, Amar, turning to the top of Lamed Vav Amud Beis, and we'll be going to the Mishnah at the bottom of this page. The hikrivu zu kabbalah sadam. This is the same thing as receiving dam, and the pasuk says v'hikrivu b'nei Aharon, and therefore below b'nos Aharon. The Mishnah had added v'hazos that a woman is not allowed to be involved in sprinkling of something. We just don't know what we're talking about because many of the halachos of sprinkling are hyper limited to kohanim. Let's see here on the top of the page. V'hazos hazot dehecha. What type of sprinkling are we talking about that a woman is exempt from? If you want to say ide para, if it's talking about the hazah of the para aduma, the pasuk says elazar ksiba, kasuba. That's not. Forget about women. Almost none of the male kohanim can do it. It has to be the kohen gadol. And idifnim, if you're talking about hazos that are done inside of the azara, hakohen hamashiach kasuba. That's also not women. A very limited space. It's only the kohen hamashiach. Ella, it must be hazah the ben of. Maybe we're talking about the sprinklings of the blood of a bird. To asya bekal v'chomer mi ben son. We have the following kal v'chomer from a young tzon, from a young sheep. Uma ben son shelo kavalo kohen l'shchitaso. When it comes to the tzon where a kohen doesn't have to do the shchita, but even there where he doesn't have to do the shchita, kavalo kohen hazah. So we need the kohen to do the hazah. Ben of shekavalo kohen limlikaso, but by virtue of the fact that the ben of must be killed only by the kohen with malika, eino din sheikvalo kohen lahazaso. It must be that those are the ones that the Gemara is talking about over here. That's the hazah of our Mishnah, talking about the hazah of a ben of. So that's what the Gemara says. We are a third of the way down, a quarter of the way down the two dots, and the last part of our Mishnah that we had learned on the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph was that an Isha Sota and an Isha Nazira, she needs to do the Tnufa. She needs to be able to do the actual movements of the Korban Mincha that she's bringing. Amar le Rabbi Eliezer le Rabbi Yoshaya Dedare. Rabbi Yoshaya Dedare is a very unique language, and the Mefarshim over here explain that Rabbi Yoshaya Dedare was referring to an Amora, who lived in his generation. There was another older Rabbi Yoshia. Is he older or younger? He must have been older. Who was actually a Tana. I don't know the age difference. I'm unclear. Don't know. But there were two Rabbi Yoshayas, and Rabbi Yoshaya Dedare was referring to the Amora. That's why there's also a correction here. It's not Rabbi Eliezer. It's Rabbi Elazar. So you got to get all the names right here to know historically what's going on. Lemaisa, this is a statement in the Amoraim. Lo teisiv akarech. Don't sit on your feet ad amrisli lahoshmaitza until you can explain what pshat of what's going on. We saw this.
To be from Dore and he wasn't speaking to an elder. Not that way, he wouldn't. That's
Whoa,
why
whoa, whoa,
the
whoa,
Gemara goes out of its way to
Say that again.
with somebody from the generation,
Yeah.
you wouldn't speak that way to somebody who's an elder.
Yeah, but that's true. But Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshaya would have worked.
Yeah, correct. That's why
Because they're both
Gemara
Tanai.
needs to clarify.
Yeah.
Don't think for a moment that Rabbi Elazar.
I can't imagine that was the Havamim of the Gemara.
Because it is that stronger. I mean, we've seen it a few times, but a little bit stronger.
We've seen this Gemara before. The Dare, haven't we seen this?
I mean, location of Kara.
That we've had a few times.
Yeah.
But the I think even the language of Yoshaya the Dare, I think we've also had.
It definitely, yeah. So it does not, yeah.
Yeah. It could be that that's a Havamina David. I don't know. Could be. Anyways, he said to Rabbi Yoshai, the Dari says to him, Lo tesev akarach, you may not sit down at the Amrsle Lahashmaitza until you can explain to me Pshat in the following sugya. Minayin lemincha sota shetu una tnufa. How do we know that the flower offering of a woman who's a sota, that it needs to have all the movements, up, down, right, left, whatever the movements are? Minalan says the Gemara, begufa ksiv. What are you talking about? Go to Shnai Mikra Vecha Targum, and you'll see that in the Shnai Mikra that it says b'fem male that a woman has to do tnufa. The pasuk says ve'hinifes amincha, literally ve'hinifes amincha, like it's very simple. No, ela tnufa be'bailim minalan. How do we know not just that it needs to have it done to it, that a kohen could do it, but that no, the bailim, the isha sota, has to be the one to do it by the bailim. Says the Gemara minalan asya yad mishlamin k'zer shava. Ksifacha v'lakacha kohen miyad ha'isha, or ksifasam yadav tiviana makan kohen avlahalan kohen and malahalan bailim avkan bailim. We need both the bailim and the kohen to do the tnufa together. How? Or Ketzad says the Gemara, kohen machnes yado tachas yad bailim umeniv. Says the Gemara that the kohen puts his hand underneath her hand, and they do the tnufa together. Says the Gemara, great. Ashkechan sota. You've answered the question, Rabbi Yoshai Dadari. You've answered the question about a sota, Nazira minalan. How do we know that this is true by Nazira? Says the Gemara, Asya, kaf misota. We have Gzera Shava from two different psukim. We have one pasuk that says, V'lakacha kohenes hazirah b'sheila v'chule. At the end of the pasuk it says, V'nasan al kapei hanazir. And then the next pasuk talks about kaf also. Ve'hamida kohen v'chule v'nasan al kapeha. Those are the two different psukim, and therefore we know that both by sota and nazira that there's a din of tnufa where the kohen and the bailim do the tnufa together. We'll stop right here. Back together next time in person on Shabbos recordings. Until then, wishing you all a beautiful night.
Thank you.